Hello everybody! My name is Rachel and welcome to my wrap-up of all of the Hugo and Nebula Award-winning novels I read in October. I read 8 of these in October, which is slightly under my goal of reading 10 per month, but I am still on track to doably finish this project by the end of the year without killing myself. I really only have to talk about 2 of these books in detail in this video, so we'll start off with all the things that I have talked about elsewhere or that I will be talking about in more detail later. First, I read 3 books that I didn't like, and I made a video about them called 3 Books I Didn't Like. And they are The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick, Stand on Zanzibar by John Brunner, which I actually do think was quite interesting to read, and A Time of Changes by Robert Silverberg, which I pretty much detested stuff in that. So go watch that video if you want to hear me rant about old classic science fiction books that I don't like that much. That is the problem with this reading project actually, that many of the books I have left to read are ones that I was never very interested in the first place, or they are very old, maybe they haven't aged very well, both scientifically or socially, and some of them just, by today's standards, are racist or sexist or just subtly off, and it makes them difficult to read. And it's going to be a theme, I think, for a lot of the books I talk about for this. So here's the thing. Usually the only nasty comments I get on YouTube are from people who don't like it when I say something bad about a classic science fiction novel by a white man, who's usually dead. So if you don't like what I have to say about some of these books, just keep it to yourself. Don't even bother, because I will delete your comment. That's exactly what I do. I delete comments like that right away because I don't need to deal with you telling me that I'm being too sensitive to misogyny in books from the 1950s. I didn't like it. Get over it. So that minor housekeeping rant out of the way. Next, Slow River by Nicola Griffith. I loved this book and I did an entire review of it, so I will link that if you want to know my full thoughts on this. It was very, very good, difficult subject matter, a little disturbing. It has to do with abuse and a variety of ways that people can be abused and ill-treated. But by the end, I was so glad that I had read it. Just beautifully written, a well put together story. And yes, I read Red Mars and Green Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson, the first 2 books in the Mars trilogy. I thought I would only get through one of these books per month through the end of the year, but no, I'm just trying to binge read the entire thing. I loved Red Mars, and Green Mars was a close second. I buddy read Red Mars with Paul from A Common Touch of Fantasy, and then I buddy read Green Mars with Amanda from A Scientist Reads. I'm so glad that I am talking to people about these while I'm reading them, because they are complex. There's no way I'm going to get everything out of each of these books without rereading them multiple times, because so much is going on. It's just really great to talk to other people about them. I'm not going to go into detail about these books yet because I really want to do an overview of the entire series once I have finished Blue Mars, so I'm going to delay this a little bit longer. I just feel like it's going to be easier to talk about the series as a whole without so much repetition if I just do it all in one big chunk. And the last 2 books that I am going to talk about in detail are The Big Time and The Wanderer by Fritz, Leiber. I didn't really enjoy either of these books either, so I will try to keep my thoughts brief on them. The Big Time was interesting because of the way it was staged. It's about a time war and this place, it's called The Place, that exists outside of time. It's kind of like a rest stop, a way station, an entertainment center, and a brothel, all wrapped up in one. Some soldiers leave the time war to come into the place, and then suddenly they get detached from time and they can't get back, and they start freaking out, and then hey, somebody brought an atomic bomb. So it's a bunch of people in a closed, locked room talking to each other about how they might never get back to the rest of the world, how time is totally screwed up, and you know what, if we're stuck here, who are we gonna make babies with? Because there are women there and there are men there, and of course they're pairing off already. So here's the interesting thing. Leiber had theater or stage experience. His father was an actor, and then Leiber himself apparently acted in some stage plays and some Shakespearean plays. So this story is kind of like a play. It's all on a stage and people enter and exit it, so it's in a very closed space, and the place itself is very important as a setting. And then the characters kind of act like they are delivering lines. Their dialogue is quite stilted in some ways, but kind of the way you would expect dialogue to be in a very old play. One of the characters is a contemporary of Shakespeare who's been taken out of his own time, and he speaks in Elizabethan English. So I thought that that was really interesting to see those kind of influences on the story, but the characters were all kind of despicable. The main character, who's one of the women who works there, doesn't do anything. She has no real original thoughts. She doesn't act in any way. She's just telling you what's going on. And she was boring. Everybody else was just kind of odious in various ways, and I didn't like the gender dynamics at all. And then I decided to move on quickly to The Wanderer, because it's the other book by Leiber on this list for me to read, and it started off relatively well. It's basically a disaster movie in a pulpy sci-fi novel format. A planet appears out of nowhere, slightly within the orbit of the moon. It starts eating the moon, and it causes catastrophic flooding and earthquakes on Earth, and a bunch of people start dying. So you're following these different people and groups all around the world as they experience these catastrophes and are watching the planet above them, and then the aliens appear. At the beginning, I thought this is gonna be real pulpy action-adventure type of fun with people trying to survive a disaster. But it just started to unravel in weird ways, and I can't. Okay, let's just use one example here. So one of our groups, a woman named Barbara, who is walking around a beach in a bathing suit, decides to go up to this like big house off the beach and ask the guy there if she can use his telescope to watch the lunar eclipse. So she walks up to this guy who's been spying on her naked and is like, hey, can I just use your telescope? Turns out he's an ancient 90-year-old multi-millionaire. And later in the book, everybody is super surprised that he's a member of the Ku Klux Klan, even though, and you cannot make this up, his nickname is KKK. And one of our heroic manly men gets kind of kidnapped by the aliens, who are actually like cats. They're like tigers and stuff, and then he has a masturbation session with the sexy cat lady and then wants to stay with her even though she's like, I don't like you very much and I feel like I just participated in a little bit of bestiality because I don't think you're like a person. I'm gonna stop there. It was not well written, the characters were just not that great, and the story went completely off the rails. It wasn't completely atrocious, but I do not understand why it won a Hugo Award. I realize I've completely forgotten to tell you guys which awards and in which years these books won for. I'm having one of those days where I can't keep myself on track while filming, so I'll put the information down in the description box if you are very interested in what years they are from, but these things span all the way from the 50s through the 90s, which is kind of cool. If you've read any of these books and you want to talk about them, please comment down below. I do love hearing from you guys, and there will be another batch of these coming up soon. Just time is flying. So until then, bye.